Welcome back to another edition of Straight Outta Flushing. I'm Dexter Henry, joined by my guy, the great Tyler Ward, a.k.a. Wardy. I hope everybody out there, I hope you are okay, because we know the Mets still aren't okay. They've lost 11 straight games. Yes, they got swept again. We were recording this after the Mets got swept by the Cubs on Sunday, 2-1 loss in 10 innings that, quite frankly, I'm going to be honest, Wardy, I saw this coming when they gave up the lead in the ninth. I saw it coming. It was not shocking to me at all whatsoever. We're not here to break down the game. We're not here to do that. We are here to talk about the disaster that has been the start of this season for the New York Mets, 7-15. Myself and my wonderful co-host, Wardy, we sat here a week ago wondering where things were going. Wardy, I'm just going to ask you this off the top. Did you think we'd be here where the losing streak would be at 11? Because I did not think so when we talked last Sunday.
Did I think that last Sunday, a week later, that we would still be on the same losing streak? No, I didn't, because I think any truly rational or irrational fan would probably tell you no, they would snap out of it by then. Not only did I think that, Dexter, but numbers were essentially on my side. The Mets have currently dug themselves into a hole that's going to take an unprecedented, truly one of one, the first of its kind of comeback to do in order to do anything of significance this year. So, yeah, to say that I'm floored by what's been going on is an understatement, and to say that there's going to be a lot of letting loose in this episode is also an understatement. So to flip it back to you, Dex,
Yes,
what
sir.
can the people know in regards to exactly what we're breaking down in this one?
Okay, so what we're going to break down is a little bit of what Wardy just hit on right there, which is if the Mets are going to turn this around, and look, we understand you're a fan of the Mets, the whole motto, you got to believe, I guess. That's kind of where I am. I guess you do, right? It's 11-game losing streak, but there's still hope. This is historical, what they would have to do. I want to start off this episode by giving people some information, right? Well, let me also just get back to what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what the Mets will have to do to make a historical turnaround, if that is actually possible. And then, where is this team in the decision-making they have to do? Yes, we are going to talk about Carlos Mendoza and whether or not it is time to make a change, because the streak is at 11. This team is 7-15. This team's payroll is what it is. And right now, when you look at it, it feels like 1993. They're looking like the worst team that money could buy. None of this looks good. So we're going to talk about that. Also, what does this mean for David Stearns? We want to talk about that too, because is he sort of skating by here with everything that's going on and the explanations that he has to have, and told the media this week that he still feels good? Wardy not going to give our thoughts on that. Wardy, I think, has some really strong thoughts that the people want to hear. I haven't heard it fully because I told him, save it for the pod, save it for the people. So we're going to do that. But Wardy, you talked about the fact that this would take a historic turnaround. Okay? Did you know this, my friend? Since 1950, right? Baseball's been going on for a long time. Just 3 teams have lost 11 games in a row and have also gone on to make the playoffs. That is the Dodgers in 2017, okay? And that 11-game losing streak happened in September, okay? The 82 Braves, they lost 11 between August 3rd and August 13th of the year, and the 51 Giants. Now, I know some people will say, expanded playoff format, we've seen things change in recent years, we've seen some teams get hot, but we even saw Cleveland last year, right? But this is so early. So when you hear numbers like that, and Wardy's here. Wardy's still rocking the Mets hat proud. He's still out in these streets putting on his Mets gear. Are you believing? Are you in this you got to believe mode? Or are you like, hey, the numbers are too strong, and my eye test has told me what I've been seeing on the field that I don't believe? Where are you right now with the Mets after this 11-game losing streak in terms of your belief that he could possibly do something historic?
My belief that the Mets can possibly do historic is that it's there, but it's not strong. The bad most certainly is outweighing the good, because how can it not be? I mean, look at this entire Mets team, okay? It's one thing, again, Dex, going back a week ago, where we were talking about this isn't just a north of 20-game sample size. This is a sample size of over half a season going back to mid-June of last year. Doesn't matter that you had the dismantlement of the core. A lot of this is still the same when looking at the continued lapses, the continued woes, the continued lack of clutching, the continued lack of identity, the continued lack of never having anything in unison. When you do finally have offense, you don't have pitching. When you have the pitching, you most certainly don't have the offense. It's more of the same. You know, the New York Mets are now in a position that they, again, have dug themselves in a hole so deep that while we can sit here and say that, yes, there is still a level of belief that they can dig themselves out of it, we can refer to the 2024 Mets, even though that wasn't as bad of a circumstance looking back, even 10 games below 500, which the Mets currently are not. Even having said that, they might be in just 72 hours from now. Only time will tell. So when you look at the 2024 run, when you look at even the 2019 Nationals, a team that was 19-31, way out of postseason play, goes on a miraculous run and Juan Soto's first season, wins the effing championship. We know that there are examples to suggest that the Mets can still find themselves to dig out of a similar manner. But it's one thing to have a belief. It's another to be completely blind as an optimist. And that is eradicated in myself as a fan. I don't know how you feel about that, Dexter. But the first couple of years under Steve Cohen, especially, I was really able to lean into that because truly there was a lot of blind optimism. We didn't really know what to expect with Steve. We just knew he was going to spend. We knew there would be a lot of turmoil and a change in direction philosophy. Well, we're here in year 6. The Mets are in a position that is looking from bad to absolutely worse. Again, the worst team money can buy right now. So I can sit here and tell you that I'm a believer, but my belief is by no means what it say was if you asked me this question 5 years ago in, say, 2021 for the New York Mets when they were having a rough go of in the first half between injuries and inconsistencies. Yeah, no, that's completely gone. Right now, I can confidently tell you that I do not feel great. I feel disgusted, quite frankly. I'm disheartened. And more than anything, I'm just at a loss of words. They have managed to get themselves to this point. Like, we talk about the Mets needing an amazing run and McGraw's famous line of, you got to believe, well, there's going to need to be a new saying that's taken away from the 2026 Mets if they do, in fact, have a run this year, because it'll be more magical. It will have to be more, it will have to be so inconceivable of something that, again, you can't comprehend that, wow, we actually just witnessed that, because the Mets, again, are in unprecedented territory that few, if not any, find themselves digging out of.
So you brought up 2024. I feel like we keep going back to that. We've been doing this the last couple of episodes. We go back to it, and you were pausing me a couple episodes ago on the optimism around that. And I do agree, different circumstance, right? You make a great point. 2024, a much lower point in that the Mets were 10 games under 500. So maybe you're going to be optimistic and say, hey, right now they're only 8 games under 500. But like you said, that's 72 hours away. They could be right there. I'm with you. They can be here. The Mets, I was thinking about this before, and I was like, well, how many bad Mets losing streaks or this bad have I seen in my lifetime? Well, not many, right? The Mets had an 11-game losing streak in 2004. They had a 12-game losing streak in 2002. Not a good era in time of Mets baseball, as the Mets fans would know. But this team hasn't – there's a lot of things you hit on. One, which the identity – we talked about this, I think this was 3 episodes ago, where we were talking about how some of the stuff feels like 2025, right? And a lot of that is the identity that has come around this team in not getting clutch hits, right? Fewest runs scored in the 7th inning or later this season. Again, Mets fans are like, this is more of the same that I'm seeing. And the best thing that you brought up, Wardy, to me here is, and I've been wondering about this too, we're going to get to Mendoza, we're going to get to Stearns, but we got to talk about Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen sold this franchise that things would be better. And I'm not here. Steve Cohen has spent the money. He has helped rebuild the farm system. I think he deserves credit for that. But I will say this again. This team was sold as being Dodgers East. We were told the Mets would win a championship in 3 to 5 years. That didn't happen. This is now year 6. It's hard to win in sports. I understand that. Steve Cohen, does he deserve to be on the hot seat too? He's made promises. He has not delivered. I'm not saying it looks like the Wilpons, because it does not. But what I'm saying is, if you're a Mets fan and you want to say to me, what's different, Dex? I can't be mad at you for that. It doesn't feel like anything is better. It doesn't feel like progress has been made. Where is the progress? Well, seriously, I say that, I'm asking that sort of rhetorically out to everybody. Where is the progress? 2024 feels like the high in all of that. And it was a high. It was a great season, a feel-good season. Wardy, I think you said this on the show. It's your favorite Mets season as a fan. And then it was taken away from you so quickly. And now, whatever you felt last year, that doesn't feel like what it feels right now. Right now, it feels for, I think, a lot of Mets fans, where are the answers? Where's the hope? Some of you might start thinking, how long till we start talking about the trade deadline and talking about who we need to sell? Because it doesn't look like you're going to be buying right now. How much of this, my friend, is on Steve Cohen? And the easy thing always to do in baseball and sports is go to the coach or manager, then the GM. Owners often don't get the heat. You don't often get the heat on the owners. Does Steve Cohen deserve some heat here, Wardy? What do you say?
I think out of the collective group of himself, David Stearns, and Mendoza, he deserves the least amount of heat because Steve Cohen had every logical reason to want David Stearns as Mets president from the jump. And it took him 2.5 years to get that. Could you give him flack for maybe the hires he made prior to that? Because he really took, with heavy emphasis, Sandy Alderson's guidance initially that first year in the organization to kind of, get the foot in the door. And while Sandy had success with the Mets, he also had a lack of success. And he was part of the old regime and the old guard. You could look at those things and nitpick if you want the Mets, if they had more stability earlier into Steve Cohen's tenure as owner, maybe they wouldn't be in this position right now. You can look at various facets on how Cohen has won about it. But for me, there's one thing that I think you can nitpick most with Steve Cohen, and where maybe he has unfortunately missed the mark here. This has a lot more to do with what has been a lack of action to this point, okay? When you have a bottom 5 record in Major League Baseball, only trailing teams like the Rockies going back to June of last year, and you decide to still not do anything of drastic change, I think of obviously the great Steinbrenner, who's no longer with us. Obviously, his son has been at the helm for a long period of time now, but I think of especially him in his prime and how dramatic of an owner he was and how many people didn't understand it. Many people truly believed it wasn't justifiable, but the one commonality in how that Yankees team was ran in its heyday was how continued successful they were because of making rash, drastic decisions until they found people that they truly felt were best for the organization and for the market that they're in, that being in NYC. So when I look at Steve Cohen and I look at there still being nothing when it comes to a level of accountability being made from a change in direction with the coaching staff to other things at the time I was talking right now, at least, it's very disheartening. And it really feels like that once again, blind optimism we had as fans with Steve is now quickly dying out because when he makes a remark in the Dodgers series after a 2-1 loss, trying to give you positive, stay optimistic, it feels more in the direction of why you should go ahead and overspend on tickets again than it is actually what the product is going to be. And that's just something that really does not hit well with fans who have lived and died with this team, who have been here well before Steve was as owner, especially, that knows what it's like to go through hell in the Will Ponzi regime. And then you see a larger payroll, you see greater yearly expectation, and the same exact end result, a team that fails to meet that expectation. If there's one other thing that maybe you could, if we're really grasping at straws here, because I think that's kind of where we're getting with Cohen. Like I said, I don't think he's at fault for much.
Right.
I really don't. Again, we have the expectation because he's invested this much year after year into the club. We have to take that into account. And I appreciate him greatly for that. But if there's one other thing to bear in mind, the New York Mets have been lauded as like essentially the best team in baseball and club hospitality since Steve Cohen has become owner.
Yep.
Both Steve and Alex have done a tremendous job at making players feel comfortable because of how they accept their families and the way that they go about, prep work, travel, everything, you name it. Steve Cohen obviously flexing the financial muscle there. I do wonder, if at all, has that been at all to the detriment of the New York Mets? Has them getting this kind of extroverted treatment in ways that you wouldn't get from most organizations in Major League Baseball hurt them in the sense of building a greater comfortability than what they would otherwise have in a circumstance that makes them have to be a bit more rugged in their lifestyle? This is just something that I do ponder and think about when we get to the point of suggesting, is Steve Cohen at fault for anything? I don't think he's really at purposeful fault for much. I think if anything, it's him doing what he thinks is the best for the club, But sadly, what he's investing in is so opposite to what the ROI is supposed to be. And that starts with the players not performing day in, day out.
So, yeah, the last part of what you said, and not that I disagreed with anything you said, but the last part of what you said really hits home for me because I am always a believer in it's about players. Players have to get it done on the field. You got to get it done. Players have agency. They've got to perform. Players have not been performing. Now, I think some Mets fans will say, why does this always feel like it happens to the Mets? They get players, they bring players in, you change the ownership, you change the regime, and it feels the same. And I get it. I understand it. I want to talk about your point that you made, Wardy, about what Steve Cohen has invested into with this team and the level of hospitality and comfort for players. It's tough for me on that. I know you were just pondering. You weren't, just to be clear, you weren't pointing fingers or anything. You're just thinking, like, does this have an impact? I think when you're the Mets and you look at their history, when Steve Cohen coming in and his resources, they had to change something. They had to change the perception of things. The Mets, let's just keep it a buck, right? Like, their perception historically around the league is not one of like, oh, this is a model franchise you want to go to. I think Steve Cohen is trying to build to that. And I do think those little things matter in how you treat people in any sports organization, in any organization, period. Anything you do for work, I think that stuff matters. But what still comes down to at the end of the day, and I think this is the point you're making, winning, right? You still got to win. You can have all the amenities. You can treat everybody nicely. You should treat people nicely. But you got to win. And if you don't have all that coming together at the same time, people will look at that and say, oh, that's dope. That's nice that you treat the people nice and you're fine. But do you guys win? No, you don't. We see you got a great high payroll. And you made changes this offseason. And you have an 11-game losing streak. And is the season over? No. Could it be over soon? Yes. And we'll get to all that. I don't think – I agree with you that he's the least to blame of the group that we're talking about in this Mets hierarchy. I do think he's going to start to take some heat too because people will start looking at him and saying, what have you done since you bought the team? Right? You've got 22 and you've got 24, right? And 22 didn't really end the way a lot of people could. 24 was a magical ride, and everything else has pretty much been disappointing. So that takes us to where we're coming back to where the Mets are today. 11-game losing streak. Last week, Wardy and I had an episode, we talked about whether or not it's time to panic. I still haven't pushed the panic button, Wardy. Maybe that's crazy. Maybe that is crazy. But the finger's right above it, okay? The finger's right above it now at this point. And for those of you that are already crashing out, for those of you that are panicking, I don't know if Wardy's here yet. I'm going to say this. And I've seen people talk about this. Some people think it's not fair to talk about the manager losing his job or getting his job. I think the manager is going to be, Carlos Mendoza is going to be given till the end of this month. I think he's probably at least going to be given till the end of this homestand that he's on now. I'm not sure he survives the homestand if he doesn't right the ship. And I don't think that's fair. But there might be some of you that think, why should he survive the homestand? 11-game losing streak. This doesn't look good. This looks like last year. Wardy, where are you on this? 11-game losing streak. Mets have an off day on April 20th. They're not playing. Then they start a 9-game homestand. Do you think, after what you've seen on this trip, where they are, is it time right now to move on from Carlos Mendoza?
Yes, a resounding yes. And
Ooh.
Let me start by saying that this is not all on Carlos Mendoza. As Francisco Lindor said post-game in his end-of-game presser there in the Mets loss just a couple hours ago, he said, this is obviously not on Mendy. And I agree. But at the end of the day, for everything we said, this is a results-oriented business. And the Mets cannot continue to justify running out the same manager who, regardless as to what he says, what he doesn't say, what he physically does, and what he physically doesn't do, nothing is getting through to this team enough. That's how it is. The Mets have had one of the worst records with Mendoza for going on north of 130 games now, over their past 130. Okay? This is not a small sample size. This is a continuation, and it's only getting worse, regardless as to who is out there as your actual on-field product, because Carlos Mendoza is not at fault for the roster construction. He's not at fault for the lack of competence continued in the Mets bullpen every single year and how that is built and how deep versus lack thereof it is. It's not his fault when a guy like Juan Soto, out of all people, goes out for 2 to 3 weeks and completely changes the complexion of your lineup because no one knows how to pick up one another. Those things are not inherently Carlos Mendoza's fault. But Mendoza, whose role is supposed to help build the identity and build the proper mentality of this organization, that he will tell you himself going back to the end of the season last year, nothing has gone better. Things have only gone worse. Nothing has led you in a direction to say, oh, the Mets are actually doing better now, and Carlos Mendoza is looking more like that 2024 manager. No. What it looks like is a manager that's getting outmanaged on a basically daily basis for decisions that maybe he doesn't fully make at times, but again, doesn't matter. The Mets are in no man's land territory. They need to do a level of saving face here. David Stearns knows that. If Cohen is giving him any pressure at all, that is. You have an off day this Monday. It makes so much logical sense to part ways with Carlos Mendoza now. Either put Kai Correa in that position, who, again, I do not love the idea of. He doesn't have any managerial experience, and he has a younger track record in today's game. But again, more analytically minded and might be able to get to the players and speak to them in a manner that's different from what Mendy is doing. You have Carlos Beltran, who you and I spoke over this past week. We think is probably the best option from a leader standpoint and really trying to maybe help build a club identity. Even though Beltran doesn't have the coaching, he's one of these guys I think once he eventually does get in that role, he's really not going to need it because he just has all the playing experience and all the knowledge to back it. Then you have Andy Green in your front office, who's looking great in player development. He's someone who does have coaching experience, managerial experience, going back to the Padres. Didn't have a resounding amount of success with them, but that doesn't change the fact that he does have experience and understands this team well in ways that people other than David Stearns probably don't know as well, with the exception of Mets skipper Carlos Mendoza. So do I feel for Mendoza? Absolutely. This situation sucks. You can tell in his post-game pressers how much he's crushed right now because no matter what he says or does, it's the same exact result. And it's going to start with him. And that's exactly how the Mets need to view this. You still have north of 140 games left this year. You still have so much money invested in this club. There still needs to be a priority into righting this ship in any which ways imaginable. The Mets don't have a track record with Carlos Mendoza to suggest that he gets a long leash until after the trade deadline this year or right around the midway mark. There's nothing to really suggest that. If it happens, that's because the Mets are still giving you a longer leash than what they otherwise should be doing. And then when you and I sit here over the next couple months, Dexter, and talk about a Mets team that's still failing to meet expectations, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I was saying now. It starts from the top, not being as proactive as what they need to be. Can David Stearns and Steve Cohen actually be proactive here for once, knowing that they're in an unprecedented situation? Time will tell, but time's ticking. Seriously, fans are understandably so fed up because if you can't get Lindor to be your guy, if you can't get Robert to be your guy, if you can't get Bichette to be your guy, if you can't get any flow of consistency with this club, at the end of the day, your job as a manager is someone who's supposed to be able to help spearhead that. You're not going to impact every player to the same degree, but you do have a role to bring a self of identity and unity to a club that yet again feels like they're playing individually. That's a major problem, and it needs to change.
I don't know what the identity of this club is, Wardy, right now, other than losing. That's if you said somebody tells me, hey, what's the Mets' identity? Losing. That's what I've seen. 11 straight losses. They haven't won. As far as Mendoza goes, and I thought you made a lot of good points. Look, Mendoza, I'm not going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here. Players have agency. Players are accountable. They've got to get it done in the field, and particularly at the plate, man, which has been the most frustrating thing to watch this season. Is just there's no situation in which this team is produced at the plate. Everybody, particularly since Juan Soto's gone out of the lineup, everybody is terrible. This is a team that's ranked 23rd out of 30 in baseball in batting average, dead last in on-base percentage, okay? 28th out of 30th in slugging. That nothing is good offensively. Nothing, right? And I want to be very clear for the people that are criticizing. I do not think Carlos Mendoza forgot how to be a good manager. That's one thing I want to be clear about. I do not think he forgot how to be a good manager. I'm not saying that Carlos Mendoza is the world's greatest manager. I'm not saying that. players are not executing right now. And maybe sometimes when that happens, it's not exactly, as Wardy just said, all in the fault of the manager, but that doesn't mean that the organization doesn't have to do something because of the time that's left, because of the money that's invested. I'm willing to give to the end of this month. That's where I am. Wardy's saying now. And here's the thing. I want to be clear. I don't think what you're saying, Wardy's harsh. Okay? I don't. Because what I would ask, if you think it's harsh, even though I'm saying I would give this homestand at least, what I think, and Wardy, you can jump in here as I say this, because I don't ever like putting words in your mouth. I think what you're questioning about when you bring up the accountability here with the Mets, what we're asking, this is what Steve Cohen's talked about. What's the standard? That's what we're asking about with the Mets. What is the standard here? Are you in this to win or not? You see,
where's the line for you?
Yeah.
Where's your line right now when you look at this losing streak, right? Do we need to lose 15 straight games for you to finally wake up and make a decision? Like, where is that tier for both Cohen and Stearns? Because again, if we see Carlos Mendoza managing on Tuesday, then we know that that tier is not where the fans want to be. There is not that level of proactiveness, and there isn't that level of what I think is justified drastic change, because they are now positioning themselves where they will not only be statistically improbable to make postseason play, they will be statistically impossible to get there. And we are so close to being on that verge already that is what lies the big problem. They've dug themselves a hole so deep. Again, I don't know how many more times I need to say it, but this is unprecedented territory. So you cannot approach it as if it is.
If you get
as if it's something else. You know
No. You're right. If you get to the end of this homestand, it's a 9-game. Let's say 9-game homestand. I'm gonna go. I don't even want to think about what happens if it was 0-9. I don't want to even do that. Could you?
I don't think that's gonna happen.
Could you imagine sitting here after a 20-game losing streak, Wardy?
If we're sitting here after a 20-game losing streak and the Mets didn't make moves, I think that would be our cutoff for the Straight Outta Flushing season podcast. Like, there would be nothing else to really get into or talk about. Genuinely, like it would be malpractice. That would make the Wilpons look like that they actually knew what they were doing. Like, we're entering that territory.
Oh my God. Yeah, we'd have to tell y'all, you guys need to get straight out of here. You don't need to listen to us, because it would be
exactly.
Like, what are you doing? Okay, let me try to bring this to somewhere. Let's say it's a sub 500 homestand, because I'm giving him to the homestand. You're at the point of now, and I'm saying this while I'm giving the homestand. I don't think Wardy's crazy on this. I just want to be very clear that if you want to do something now and you want to make the change now, I don't think it's clear. It's crazy. Let's say they're 4-5. Okay, that puts them in 9 games under 500. That's my question. You hit it appropriately. What's the line for you for when this season is going to derail? If you're talking about the goal was getting back to the playoffs, competing for championships, I'm not even going to go to the whole Dodgers East stuff because the Mets are so far from that right now. What's the line? You have to you have to have a code. You know, one of my favorite shows of all time, The Wire. A great quote is, "A man's got to have a code."
The Wire.
Man's got to have a code, by Bunk Moreland in there. An organization has to have a code too. A team has to have a code. They got to have a line, Wardy. And I think you put it appropriately. What is the line here? Do we need to see another sweep? Do we need to see do you feel good if there's a winning homestand? There's a world in which the Mets go 8-1 in this winning homestand, and everybody's going to be like, okay, they're back over 500 and things feel good. Okay, fine. I think the manager deserves this homestand. But another quote from The Wire, deserve sometimes ain't got nothing to do with it. And it's not about you.
My favorite quote.
What's your favorite Wire quote?
No.
Go ahead.
My favorite Wire quote is to famously, state the state of the New York Mets right now. And it's long. Shit. And just really, really long every single time. Like that's exactly how I feel. That's the club right now. But amazing show.
Did not foresee us having some talk about The Wire in this and coming up with 3 quotes, but
it's more entertaining than the Mets right now, that's for sure.
That is true. Okay. Look, before we get out of here for the people, we've talked about Mendoza. You're at the point where you would say goodbye right now on the off day. I personally don't think it's crazy, but I would give him here. We got to talk about David Stearns, because if let's say your David Stearns plan is, and also Steve Cohen's plan is, okay, we're going to give Mendoza this homestand. Okay, here's the problem. If the homestand starts off terribly, okay? Let's say it starts off bad with another sweep. What are you going to do? Because see, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I think we're talking about with the line, Wardy. Let's say
and Stearns.
Yeah, go ahead.
And Stearns has this issue too, where he is not like we're not getting any clarity from his point of view and what he views Carlos Mendoza to be from the stance of not just like a good manager, but like in the value of him as a manager. Because right now, as long as he is still skipper of this Mets team, that means that the New York Mets view Carlos Mendoza as the still best option for them to right the ship this year than to consider drastic change in season, because they think that maybe it'll be too heavy to weigh on the players to make such an early drastic change, right? But think about that. That still feels like flawed way of thinking, because the Mets don't have the track record with this group, with this manager, to suggest that that is a valiant thought to have in the first place. You need to get uncomfortable. All they've done is made every fan imaginable feel uncomfortable. You know, when we have people that locked in season tickets, I've hundreds, so many of my followers, biggest rant that they've had so far this year is how many games they've already locked in on the season that they can't get out of.
I've seen this.
You know,
yeah.
like again,
but Wardy,
like, what are we doing here?
Let me ask you this. Let me. I'm playing devil's advocate here. What if Stearns is thinking, because you just said Mendoza doesn't have enough of a track record to possibly make you believe that he could turn this around. But what if Stearns is thinking is 2004, 2024. What if
that's the problem? That's an anomaly. That shouldn't be viewed like that's. Why do we need to continue to dig ourselves in almost improbable holes to be like, oh, you know what, we're fine. We went through it once, we'll do it again. Like,
so when you're saying that, right? You're all. This goes back to the question I was bringing up. I don't disagree with you. That when you say that, if somebody says, well, I've seen Mendoza use in 2024, and if you say that's an anomaly, that brings me to the point of what's the standard here? 2024 can't be your standard. It can't. Like, credit to that team. Gave us a lot of joy. OMG, some of you guys got down with the grimace stuff. I did not, whatever. Okay? I don't want to call it flash in the pan. I don't want to say that exactly because I feel it feels a little too disrespectful to the players on the team. But, okay, a year where you looked dead in May and you came back and had a run to the NLC, that's the standard? This is what we're falling back on? I'm with you, but that might be part of his thinking. I don't think it's enough to fall back on. I just wanted to play devil's advocate because I know some people will think that, and that our viewers and listeners will think that, and they will say that, but I'm just like, that can't be the standard. The standard has to be, the standard was supposed to be sustainable winning, but you know the first part of it, they have, well, it's in the second part of the word, winning. They haven't done the winning consistently. So how is anybody supposed to believe it's sustainable?
We don't even know what sustainability is.
No,
like we literally don't even know what this shit is. We're like everything that we want, that we're longing for, is stuff that we've seen other organizations do. Like for everything that can drive me nuts about the aspects of the Yankees, for example, the one thing that I will always give tip of the cap and credit for is that, you know, them still at their worst is in many cases Mets fans being envious of that being more towards a Mets fan's best. You know, they're so used to having great regular season success that for them, it's been more about them having a large hump where if they don't win this year, it'll be their largest World Series gap since literally the early 1900s. So they have that problem to deal with and spearhead. But they know exactly what they need to do to get through the normal 162 without really thinking twice about it. For the New York Mets, it's a completely different thing. It's on an opposite spectrum. You know, it's about how do we find a way to make it work throughout the 162 when we know that this is going to collapse then, that these players aren't going to perform here, that this isn't going to go as expected then. Like, it just, there's so many things. It's not one thing. And it goes down to, unfortunately, what we know so well as Mets fans, Dexter. You can attest to this as a more seasoned veteran of a fan. It's that no matter who's put in position, there is still a stench and there is something haunted over this club. And I wish I was joking, but I'm really not. There's just still something so inherently wrong about this team, no matter who comes in and does what. Because until we have someone come in and actually change that narrative, why should we believe otherwise?
Facts. I can't say that you're wrong, but to your point, and I think this is where I'm glad you brought that. We'll bring it home and wrap here. This is why maybe you have to do something that is quote unquote drastic, right? Do something
irrational,
that says, right, and proactive. Another word that you've used too, right? That you're gonna say, hey, no. I know who we are, because I'm a big believer in this. Sometimes you got to know who you are. The Mets, you got to know who you are. You don't have a history of sustainable winning. You're the Mets. And I say that with the utmost love. This is not coming from a place of hate. This is coming from a place of love. You got to know who you are. And when you know who you are, and you're saying where you want to go, you want to be the Dodgers East. You want to have sustainable winning. Well, sometimes that's going to take making some tough decisions. Sometimes that's going to take making some people uncomfortable. Sometimes it's going to take doing something drastic to say, this is unacceptable. I cannot blame any fan. I cannot blame anyone in media that is saying the Mets need to do something to say that this is unacceptable. They need to show that they're not comfortable with this. This is not the standard 11-game losing streaks in April. This isn't the standard. The standard isn't banking on another 2024. That has to be unacceptable. That, to me, Wardy, that's how you build culture. That's how you build sustainable winning. We just mentioned the Braves a few years ago when they did this. And they said, oh, we had a losing streak, but they're willing to look themselves in the eye and say, what's wrong with us? What do we need to do? What do we need to change? And they're an organization, hate them or love them as a Mets fan, you know you love them. They've had sustainable success. The Mets can't say that. So if you want to get that, you're going to have to do some things that are uncomfortable. Otherwise, you can't blame anybody if they say, you're talking about curses and there's a stench around the team. Are people saying same old Mets? Can't blame them for that. How does this, what we're seeing now, look any different? It doesn't. And look, I'll say this. If this doesn't change it, this isn't about me and Wardy and this podcast or anybody else who does a Met show. If this continues in this way and there isn't drastic change, I talked about it getting late early. It's going to get ugly. And what I mean by ugly is people aren't going to show up to Citi Field. It's going to happen. And I never, ever, ever blame fans for that. Because you wielding your money and how you spend your money to watch any teams that you root for is your biggest power. Now, again, I understand you love this team. Some of you bought season tickets. I get all that, man. But nobody's going to want to show up when the product is bad. And the Mets know this. Management knows this. But like you said, there's 140 games or so left. What are you going to do? Or are we saying this is the stand? We're going to learn this week, Wardy. I can say whatever you want to say. This is a 9-game homestand. You got 3 with the Twins, 3 with the Rockies, and 3 with the Nats. Okay? The Mets have a chance to clean up here. But what we're going to learn this week that is more important than anything is what is the line and what is the standard? And that's the biggest question with the Mets right now. What is the line and what is the standard? And I can't answer it because I have no idea. And Wardy, if you got an answer to it, then they should put you in the front office.
If they put me in the front office, it's going to look great for about a week, maybe like the Mets, and it's going to be an absolute tailspin from there. No good will come of it. Too much overreaction is what will likely happen. But I'll leave you with this, Dex. Yeah. I'll leave Mets fans with this. If we get to Tuesday and Carlos Mendoza is still Mets manager, we will have a conversation with either just myself or you and I both midweek talking about, is that the right or wrong move? We're going to get into a lot more on this club because while, again, it does truly start to feel like the sky is now beginning to fall, if it has not fallen flat on its face already for this Mets club, the good news, and if you want to find any little silver lining, like we've been saying, is the fact that the Cleveland Guardians can bounce back 10 games below 500 with the expanded playoff format last year. The Mets snap this losing skid after 11. Maybe they rewrite and make their own version of history this year with the new playoff format. That's really all you can kind of cling on to. Otherwise, just Mets fans, proceed with caution, okay? You know very well to have thick skin by now. No need to lower your guard down and have yourself vulnerable because this team has given us nothing to be buying into right now, sadly.
Man, it is April 19th, 20th, and Wardy's out here telling you to proceed with caution. None of that is good.
Caution.
none of that is.
Nope.
You can only laugh. That's the only thing I can do is laugh. All right. We'll again, this week will tell us a lot. Wardy and I will have more conversations for you about that, especially if Carlos Mendoza is still managing this team when the series against the Twins starts on Tuesday. That'll be very interesting. Look for more midweek conversations from myself and Wardy coming on Straight Outta Flushing. And, hey, let us know in the comments. What is the line? What should be the line? What should the Mets do this week? What do you want to see them do this week? Do you agree with myself and Wardy? Let us know down in the comments. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button for you boys. That is the great Tyler Ward. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next time on another edition of Straight Outta Flushing. Peace.